Welcome, everybody, to the High Return Real Estate Show. And today is, gosh, I don't know what to tell you. It's going to be a very, very unusual and exciting conversation with a very, very dear friend of mine. This is not your typical how to invest kind of conversation. However, by the end of this episode, we are going to make you a better investor. So I know that sounds really, really counterintuitive, but you'll see what I mean in just a minute.
Welcome to the High Return Real Estate Show, the podcast for heavy hitters. Two men, one mission. It's time to build your empire.
So welcome back, everybody. Today I have the fun and distinct pleasure of introducing my good friend, Erica Allen. Hello, Erica.
Hi.
How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah, me too. So I would just kind of want to set this tone a little bit that you have been obviously involved in the corporate world your whole life, even though today we're going to have probably a little bit more of a spiritual type conversation.
Right.
And it's interesting because you and I both share this sort of same desire to live more in a heart space and make decisions from a heart space rather than from this brainy intellectual space. And it's a struggle I've had for many, many years. And I want to just briefly tell the story about how we met. So I was surfing through Facebook one day, and one of my friends on Facebook had posted a video of a talk that you had given here in Indianapolis through an organization called Walk the Talk. And I was like, okay, this girl's kind of cute. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to click on the video, and I'm going to watch the video. And I was just blown away by this video because it just resonated with me so strongly. It was a conversation all about synchronicities and how, I've always felt like there's a lot of things that happen sometimes, and that oftentimes things do happen for a reason, but we don't necessarily always know what they are. And anyway, so the talk was so inspiring to me, and I knew that you had lived in Indianapolis, so I just reached out to you. I kind of stalked you on Facebook a little bit and just said,
Great.
We have some mutual friends. You don't know who I am, but I was really, really taken with your talk. And I just feel like you're the kind of person that I want to meet. So you were kind enough eventually after, I don't know, I spent about a week begging, and then you finally said, okay, let's just meet for coffee. And we did, and we've been friends ever since. And it's been a wonderful friendship, and I'm super appreciative of it. And so I'm even more excited to share some of the things that I learned from you and things that you and I talk about on a regular basis with our listenership, even though it's a little bit out of our normal lane. So I really just want to ask you more about your evolution a little bit. Like, how do you go from being this corporate, making big decisions? I know you worked for a very big company that we're not going to mention any names there, but how do you move between those worlds? How did you evolve to get to that point?
Right. Well, I'm still in process. So as we all are. For me, and I talk about this in the talk, there was a real life experience. My best friend got really sick and passed away at the same time I was going through a divorce. And so that was a sort of soul crushing experience. And I was at the company I'm at now. My boss at the time was just so supportive, and really he honestly taught me a lot about getting in your heart space and allowing yourself to heal and not trying to hold everything together. So that was really the catalyst for me to say, hey, there's something more that I need to listen to in my life, not just here at work, but in general. And so I was really encouraged to move from a place of this work-life balance where you're this way at work and this is what you do, but this is who you really are, into integrating that into just you show up for life. And so that kind of put me on this journey of understanding intuition and what does it mean to move out of my head, which was always going and talking and thinking, and sort of that beta state of just almost anxiety, overthinking, and not listening to my gut. So I've been on this journey pretty intensely for about 3.5 years now, really just trying to understand, meet new people like you, talk about it, and really a whole world of new thinking and new feeling has opened up as a result.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you touched on something that I've been wanting to ask you about, and it's, you and I both kind of like the sciencey side of things too. I mean,
Right.
I can appreciate in my mind, there's becoming less and less conflict between spirituality and science.
Right.
So what I want to talk about, because you mentioned beta state. So for people that are just beginners to this stuff, because I've been looking at this stuff for years and I still feel like a beginner.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe I think there's four main type of brainwave states.
Mm-hmm.
So could you elaborate a little bit on that and what they mean? And because I think there's listeners that are going, well, she just said beta state.
Like, what does that mean?
I don't know what the F that is. So like, can you?
I'm just learning what the F that is. So,
Yeah. Well,
um,
go ahead and share.
yeah, to your point. So I am actually a scientist, but not a brain scientist, more clinical laboratory science. But what I mean by the beta state, and I just have a very high level kind of basic understanding, is beta brain waves are when we're in that kind of thinking, acting, making decisions, just sort of the autopilot mode of go, go, go. And then alpha is more of a conscious awareness, more of a relaxed awareness, but you're not as frantic or on, just kind of observing and resting into what's really going on around me, which is where you start to tap into your intuition in waking states. And then from there, you have theta, which is a lot more of a deep meditation, maybe even starting to fall asleep. And then delta is kind of a deep sleep, meditative state. And again, if there's someone listening who is an expert in that, forgive my sort of basic glossing over of it. But my point when I mentioned the beta state was that I think we are in a society and a world where that is what's prized, just going, making decisions, being fast, on the go, and we've sort of lost touch with our intuition, as you said. And so if you can somehow, and what I try to do even on a daily basis, is allow my decisions to be made more in that alpha state, where instead of, when you feel that frantic, I got to know, I got to decide, you can almost feel sort of this, I'm being pressured to do something or make an answer, and we got to know, and you feel a stress, to train your brain to say, wait a second. And even if you start out with just 2 minutes of silence, if meditating is overwhelming or it seems too touchy-feely, voodoo, just start with even some silence of relaxing into it. So
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think part of that is the curse of the Western world. It's like, especially in America, it's like,
mm-hmm.
The American dream, and you're chasing after, and you want to be successful, and you want to have the nice house in the suburbs, and you want to have this great retirement, and you want to provide this great life for your kids, and and you want to have the two nice cars in the driveway. Like, it's just all part of our American or Western programming.
Right.
And it's interesting to me because I've been a yogi for about 7 years now, and pretty regular. I mean, probably on a good week, 4 to 6 times a week, and it has really, really helped me because obviously our business is very, very busy, and we're go, 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 and getting properties ready and doing all this stuff. And for me to just have a few minutes in the studio where I don't have to think about work, and I can get into my body, and I can at the end get into a restful state after a good period of exercise. It is completely changed my life. I don't necessarily mean that it has to be yoga for somebody.
Right.
It just, I'm so consumed by the crap that goes on between my two ears that I almost need the instruction of a yoga teacher and to carve out and separate out that time and go, okay, this is my time to just release everything.
Right.
Just do that. And I agree, some of my best ideas come by getting so sick of the stuff that goes on in my head that I just say, screw it. I'm just going to go for a walk,
Right.
or I'm just going to go take a shower, or I'm going to go to a yoga class, or I'm going to go ride my bike, or whatever. I'm just going to forget about it. And I don't know why or how this works. I'm sure you could probably explain it better than I can, but there's something about just saying screw it and not dealing with the decision that somehow magically makes that decision easier to come to.
Right. It
And
is interesting how that happens, right? It's like, or you have a dream about it or something when you completely have forgotten it. You find, like if you've lost something, you stop looking for it and you find it type thing. So it's
yeah,
a similar energy. Um, I think it's because the more that you, even if you start with just taking a walk, it doesn't have to be, oh, I'm going to go take a walk so I can find the answer, and you just remain in that same state. It's truly saying, and it's almost giving yourself permission to stop striving for 5 minutes. Will these 5 minutes really impact the decision if you take it? Typically, no. And so it's, I don't want to say discipline because that sounds stifling, but it sort of is. I mean, and it's because we're trying to retrain our brains and retrain our minds. And so sometimes you even have to fire some of those voices in your head and say, hey, you've been critical, you've been, we all have this, whether it's traumas from our past or just the society we live in, where we are pretty hard on ourselves. And yeah, in that beta state. And for me, I recognized after doing this often enough that I kind of had a real a-hole in my head. And the more that I could just, to your point, just take a walk or sit in silence or, cry, whatever I needed to do, and just even love that a-hole in my head and say, what's going on? Why, once you can kind of clear all of that out and it's just a little more relaxed, I guess, in that alpha state where you're like, okay, I'm watching myself yell at myself in my head. I'm watching myself blow up at people, or I'm watching myself, sweating, or whatever your symptoms may be. And the more that you do it, the better you get at it. I think you mentioned when we talked about it before, it's like a muscle. You almost have to train it. It doesn't just happen overnight if you're used to not using it.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting subject, and I want to segue to that because what you're talking about is being the observer. Mm-hmm. And, this is obviously talked about very much a lot in the meditative world. The people that are, more spiritual leaders, things like that, is how do you be the observer? So, and I don't know if that's like your main technique. What I really wanted to ask you before diving into that is obviously we've got a lot of real estate investors that listen to this show. So we recognize and we talk to the investors all the time. And, some people just you serve them up a really, really great property and everything's done, ready to go, and it's performing and it makes sense for their portfolio and everything is good. Like there's no reason for there to be any kind of hurdle to overcome. Yet they're so in their head and so analytical that they end up in what we affectionately call analysis paralysis.
Right?
And so, and that happens obviously more than just in the real estate investing world. It happens to everybody.
Human nature,
yeah. Yeah, it's human nature. And that's exactly the segue. So is the way that we're talking, I guess what I'm trying to do is give our listeners, if you're a beginner or even advanced or whatever at this stuff, what's the best advice that you could give somebody right when they are struggling with a decision? Is it just walk away? Is it go take a walk? Like, what do you think is your best technique, let's just say?
Well, if they're coming from a place of real awareness, they could also take some time to see how they've made decisions in the past. And were the ones that were hasty or stressed a better outcome, a better investment? or were those ones that turned out to not be as good? So you can get some of that transition where you can analyze your past, like you're observing it. To your point, you're observing, how did this work for me before? But in the moment, if you're trying to make a decision, I think anytime that there's pressure or force, whether it's, I'm certainly not from you all, because I know you don't, that's not how you operate and you're not pressuring people at all. But if it's from some other source, their internal voice, their family, their friends, their business partners, and it feels pressured or something just feels like, man, why do I need to know right this second? That's almost always a red flag to say, let me just pause. Not that the deal's not a good deal, but you're not making it from your intuition. You're kind of in a, because typically in my experience, when I know that I'm making a decision sort of in that alpha state or down in my intuition, I don't feel pressure. It just feels right.
Okay, so let's dive one layer deeper into that. So again, it's a muscle, and you start saying, okay, I start recognizing that I'm feeling the pressure, so I'm just going to release that pressure, right? How can you tell when you're not operating from the head and you're operating more from the heart? Like, how do you actually physically or emotionally or energetically practice moving into your heart space?
Mm-hmm. Well, so for me, when I'm in an intense meeting or something and a decision needs to be made, I actually subtly just kind of put my hand here, whether I play with a necklace or a button on my shirt, and my body physically then is placing attention on my heart space.
Cool.
And so sometimes that will allow a pause, just body. I mean, there's lots of theories on body language and how to navigate a meeting in those ways when you need time to think or feel, but you can't. So how do I know? Usually there's a relaxing. So I carry a lot of tension right here in my shoulder. And oftentimes I'm like this and I don't even know it. So if I can be aware of, for me, that's my spot where I know that I'm kind of tensed up because I'm trying to fight or go, or there's the fight, the flight. I can usually take a big deep breath, put my hand right here, and kind of, you almost imagine the breath going into your stomach. And you can do this right in a meeting. It could just be, I mean, people take deep breaths in meetings all the time, doesn't mean anything. So,
yeah.
And I think that something where I see a paradigm shift happening in corporate is that it's okay to say, I need some more time to think about this.
Yeah.
So if you're still not in that place of feeling like it's go time, if you will, or there still feels like nerves, I think it's just about identifying for you, where do you carry your stress? Where, when you're nervous, if you're nervous about speaking in front of people, where do you feel that? Maybe that's your gut. Maybe that's, you know what I mean? You just almost have to observe yourself in general in life. And then once you're in the situation where you have to make the decision, you've kind of practiced that muscle of observing yourself and feeling literally sensations in your body. Is it tension? Does your heart race? Do you feel sweaty?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice, Erica. I don't think enough people it's almost like, I mean, I'd say this jokingly, but like, when kids get all worked up and stressed out, what do? We put them in timeout,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So what's wrong with an adult taking a timeout, even if it's 20, 30 seconds, right?
Right.
There's something about just doing that, shifting, changing. I'm a fan of Tony Robbins, and he often talks a lot about changing your state.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's going the other way, getting more excited so that you can get more stuff accomplished. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that either. But he also talks about the reverse too. And a lot of the success training that he does is in teaching people how to control their state.
Right.
Something, a little asterisk that I want to throw on here too is, this is just stuff that I have found that works for me, is that as an observer, I recognize that there's this concept called the monkey mind, like we're always, there's all the chatter going on, right? And you talk about, in terms of observation, saying, okay, well, that's what I know what I do. I've almost gone to an understanding that all human beings do that. And the reality is, our minds are not necessarily us. There's our brain, right? And there's our gut. And we're learning now, science is teaching us that a lot more of our whole functioning has to do with gut biome, and the connection to our heart and the connection to our brain is more stronger through our gut than through our brain. So when I get into that sort of frenzied mode, or the brain starts going, I stop and say to myself, oh, that's not me. There you go, being human again. And it really helps me to create some separation, to go like, the real me, the essence of me, my soul, is not this whirly bird stuff that's going on in my head, because even when I'm able to let that go, the rest of me is still here. So that's been a technique that's been pretty effective for me, and just breathing and all that. And other thing that I don't know if you're into this kind of stuff too, but I wanted to share this, that I learned, I don't remember, it was when I first started really going down this deep rabbit hole of my marketing background, which was about 10 years ago. About 8 years ago, I was in a conference and I met some guy, and he was just talking all about the power of language. So when you said in the boardroom, I need a day or so to think about it, that's what made me want to talk about this, because I'm trying not to use that word. I don't want to think about it, right? Oftentimes with Jack's my business partner, and he and I have conversations all the time, and I'm trying to say the opposite and go, hey, dude, I don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah, that's a better word, really, to shift, right. Make the shift.
Right. So I don't feel like this is the right thing for us, or I feel like this would be a really good thing for us. But I'm trying to replace the word think with feel, because that also triggers your body to behave in that way. So that's just kind of,
that's a more authentic way to say it too. I think, I feel when I'm using the word think, what I mean is I need to take time to go and feel and get into that space. So you're right. It's a better way to just say, hey, something doesn't feel right yet, or something feels off still, or whatever, because to your point of what's the goal, I mean, we want other people to learn to tap into this. And if we're not using the right truth, then it's not as effective. So good point.
Yeah. Well, and the other layer to it is, whether people recognize this or not, I mean, we get to choose our own reality. So, knowing that the 99.9% of the listeners to this show are real estate investors, I mean, you get to wake up in the morning and decide, like, it's either like, all these great deals come to me, or great deals are hard to find.
Right. It's a choice. And I think, to your point back with feeling, it's learning. It's sort of a fake it till you make it, but not really. It's, so if I make this investment and I see that I've, gotten a really nice place for someone that they wouldn't have otherwise had, or I've made an income to support my family, what would that feel like? You almost have to use your imagination and your, what is it that we're trying to accomplish or feel or experience when we're investing? Why are we investing? So if you think about or feel into the answer to that, that's how you create that reality, is by feeling it now. And I'm excited, I'm happy, I feel less stress, I have more freedom, whatever the answer is. Okay, what would more freedom feel like? What would less stress feel like? Do that now.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And the reality is, we are much more motivated by our feelings than our thoughts. I'm talking about motivation now. So if you think about why anybody would do whether it's real estate or any other kind of investing, they're doing it to build a better life. And if you start diving down into what a better life looks like for each one of these individuals, maybe it's, hey, I really want my kids to go to a great college. I really want them to have a better life than what I did. I want to be able to retire early. Like, for me, you know, it maybe, I'm going to say mean, I don't mean me, for someone, it might be like, you know what, that I may only need to make 80 grand a year, but I want to live on that houseboat in Florida. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
that's just it for me. Other people want 12 mansions. I'm not here to suggest that any of that is right or wrong. I'm here to suggest that we're motivated by those feelings. So I think you bring up a really good point, and to say that's another really great tool for projection in the decision making, is to say, why am I doing this? How will I feel if I get this? Will this decision get me to that feeling?
Right.
You know, because let's face it, you know, all we can do from a standpoint of like, I'm just going to frame it in terms of our company, is we serve up pictures, inspection reports, numbers, all that other kind of stuff. And, you know, we can't serve up their feeling,
Right. Yeah,
right?
you mentioned
So
it as the forgotten metric.
yes, and that's what the title of the show is: intuition being the forgotten metric. And you know, we talked about this the other day too. It's like you said, it's a muscle, and I think that when you're constantly in the beta, you know, brainwave state, and it's all
Mm-hmm.
just like go 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 decision, you know, just physical world, then it tends to stymie or atrophy that other muscle.
Right.
So for the listeners, just understand that this, you know, getting more in tune with yourself, your soul, your intuition, all that, that doesn't just happen overnight.
It
It's
really doesn't. Yeah.
yeah, it's a muscle, and it we're all built in with it. It's innate. Now, you know, you might think I'm speaking in a very airy fairy way, but I know that it's there. We all have it. We even if you are not a believer in any of this stuff, I will give you a phenomenon, and everybody has experienced that. And you really start thinking hard about a person, like I really haven't talked to him in a long time, and all of a sudden you run into him at the grocery store,
Mm-hmm.
or 10 minutes later your phone rings and it's them. Okay, we've all experienced that. There is not one person on the planet that has not experienced that phenomenon. So that is your energetic side operating. So
Right.
just understand that we all have it. The muscle is there. You know, the only reason you're saying you maybe don't believe this is because you've never really gone to the gym with that muscle. You've never really worked it out. It's completely atrophied.
Well, and
But
we're taught it's just coincidence. I mean, that beta brain, the monkey mind is, oh, that, yeah, just a coincidence, doesn't mean anything. And we don't necessarily pause to notice. We don't want to overread into it, but it's kind of like when you mentioned at the beginning, the talk on signs and synchronicities. I mean, that's what the talk is about. It's going from, um, maybe observing those things or noticing them as just, I called it hippy dippy baloney in my talk, because I was not really a believer in it at the time, but as it slowly started happening more and more, and I just made a choice of, I want to understand my intuition better. Then it, to your point, you almost create a reality where you see these types of things happening, and you almost just pause and go, whoa, okay. So yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. So this is great. This has been fantastic. I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit, because there's a question I want to ask you that Jack and I always like to ask all our guests, and that is this: what is the question that I didn't ask you that I should have?
On this particular topic.
Well, or anything. Is there anything that you want to share to, you know, put the icing on the cake, or something maybe we didn't cover, or
Right.
then
I think, we maybe touched on it a little bit, but just what I would want to share, again, I'm not 100% sure of your listener base, but they're investors and people that are, probably high vibing, trying to do the right thing, and also are used to being in that monkey mind or beta state, as we all are. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the beta state. It's part of being human. But is to realize that you have to give yourself permission to change your paradigm in thinking. And that's
yeah,
how it happened for me. So to tie in your first question, kind of that we started with about how did I do it? I think it was just being patient with myself and all the things that we're taught to love other people, be patient, be kind, be forgiving, give them grace, whatever. We really need to make sure we're doing that for ourselves and to ourselves. and the monkey mind, if you will. So I think it's just, I don't want people, or I hope people walk away with knowing that you can start small and you will grow this intuition, because if you seek this light or this truth, you'll find it. And it doesn't have to immediately be that we're a yogi or that we're meditating for an hour a day. You know, it can start and you can progress your way towards it, and really just trust, whether it's universe or God or synchronicity, whatever you want to call it, it's learning to trust as well.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think, again, part of the human condition is that we tend to all be our own worst enemies and
Right.
most critical of ourselves. For whatever reason, it's oftentimes easier to show compassion for others than it is for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you guys give yourselves a break. This is
Yeah. And I mean, back to the brain state, and you've heard of alpha males or alpha females. I mean, they're people that are typically in charge, assertive, make good decisions. And oftentimes an investor type, or the people I work with, myself included, are somewhat alpha as a personality trait. And so I kind of remember it as, if you want alpha up, or to stay up in that alpha state, you need to make sure you're bringing your alpha brain waves up too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Great advice. Now, this has been fantastic. I am so glad that you came on the show and that we had a chance. And this is obviously a little bit different than what we normally do. And for the listeners, I hope you got a lot of value out of that. Don't forget to comment and give us thumbs up, and give this one 5 stars on iTunes. But the talk that Erica gave is on YouTube. It's got a one of those crazy YouTube URLs, so I'm not gonna spell it out here. But if you go to YouTube and just look up Erica Allen Walk the Talk, you will absolutely find it, and we will certainly provide a courtesy for our listeners to, and we'll put the YouTube link into the show notes. So if you want to go and watch the video that started a nice friendship with myself and Erica, and what I was so drawn to, I would encourage you to go watch the video. It's 10, 12 minutes.
Yeah, about 10 or 11. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you're not having to commit your whole life to watch it, but I would encourage you to check it out. And Erica, thank you so much for being here and sharing your beta wisdom, your alpha wisdom, your brain, your heart. It's all extremely beautiful. So,
yep. Thanks, Jeff. And I appreciate our friendship as well. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great.